We started this company when I was 23 years old.
Spotify, once the revolutionary force in music streaming, is now facing growing resistance. Artists are pulling their music from the platform, top podcasters are voicing concerns, and users are calling for change. What went wrong for Spotify, and where does it go from here? A major battle is brewing in the music business, and Spotify, the world's leading streaming platform, is caught in the eye of the storm. In full damage control mode, the company is scrambling to address the growing backlash from artists and users alike. The revolt sparked by the viral hashtag Delete Spotify movement has reached new heights. Artists, feeling underpaid and undervalued, are removing their music from the platform in protest. Meanwhile, Spotify's top podcaster, Joe Rogan, has broken his silence amid mounting criticism, apologizing to fans. "If I put you off, I'm sorry," he said. Even Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, who signed a lucrative podcasting deal with Spotify, have voiced their concerns about the platform. Their worries, along with those of many artists and podcasters, have intensified the controversy surrounding Spotify. Once celebrated for revolutionizing the music industry and making streaming accessible to millions, Spotify is now facing a storm of criticism. It seems the very model that helped it dominate the market is beginning to unravel. The platform, originally designed to give listeners easy access to music while offering artists a new way to distribute their work, is now under fire for its payout structure, its relationship with artists, and its growing reliance on podcasts. The company that once prided itself on its ability to change the way the world listens to music is now in a fight for its survival. "We started this company when I was 23 years old," says Daniel Ek, Spotify's founder. In 2006, Ek was experiencing what many would call a quarter-life crisis. Despite having sold his first business, That Vertigo, an advertising firm for millions, Ek was not fulfilled. He had retired early, bought himself a Ferrari, and spent his days partying with friends, living what many would consider the dream. But something was missing. Despite his newfound wealth and freedom, he felt a void that nothing seemed to fill. It was in this moment of confusion and yearning that the idea for Spotify was born. Ek realized that the digital music world was fragmented, and accessing music legally was both expensive and inconvenient. That's when he decided to create something that would change the way people experience music forever. Spotify's mission was simple but incredibly ambitious. Make music available to everyone, everywhere, instantly, and for a fixed monthly fee. But turning that vision into a reality wasn't easy. At the time, the music industry was struggling with piracy. Digital downloads were rampant, and the industry was struggling to adapt to the new digital age. Record labels and artists were wary of the idea of music streaming, fearing it would further erode their profits. It took years of negotiations and careful strategic planning for Spotify to get off the ground. In 2008, after securing licensing deals with major labels, Spotify launched in Sweden. The early days were rocky. Spotify had a meager catalog compared to what it would eventually build, and it was faced with questions about its financial sustainability. Would they be able to survive by giving away music for free while paying record labels and artists a fraction of the revenue? The answer, as it turned out, was yes, but it would come at a steep cost. Spotify, in its early days, was losing money fast. To make the service work, it had to sign major agreements with record labels and publishers, agreeing to pay them a hefty portion of its revenue. For the first few years, Spotify was in the red, and there was no guarantee that it would ever turn a profit. Spotify's model was based on getting millions of users to sign up for its premium service, which would subsidize the free tier users who had to deal with ads. In the beginning, Spotify had to convince users that this new way of listening to music, streaming rather than owning, was the future. It took some time, but Spotify eventually succeeded in capturing the hearts and minds of users worldwide. By 2010, Spotify had expanded to the UK, and in 2011, it made its way to the United States. As Spotify grew, so did its catalog. The company struck deals with more record labels, expanded its user base, and eventually introduced a premium tier that gave users an ad-free experience along with offline access to music. It looked as though Spotify was unstoppable, but the company's relationship with the music industry was always fraught with tension. The streaming service's early success came at a cost. Spotify had to pay record labels around 70% of its revenue. This left the platform with very little money to cover its operational costs, let alone turn a profit. Artists, meanwhile, were often left frustrated by the small payouts they received for streams of their music. It became clear that Spotify was a much better deal for listeners than it was for musicians. Artists began to question whether the streaming model was sustainable for them. And that brings us to today, where Spotify finds itself at a crossroads. Despite its massive success, with over 400 million users worldwide and a catalog that includes millions of songs, the platform is facing a wave of criticism from musicians. Many artists argue that the payout structure is unfair. A song streamed 1 million times on Spotify might earn the artist only a fraction of a penny. In an age where music has become a commodity, artists are questioning whether the exposure that streaming offers is worth the low pay. This sentiment has been amplified by the rise of Delete Spotify, a movement where both musicians and listeners have begun pulling away from the platform. Artists like Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, and even some newer acts have removed their catalogs from Spotify in protest of what they see as a system that exploits their work. These withdrawals come as Spotify continues to rack up more subscribers, yet the pressure from the music industry and its own content creators continues to mount. The backlash has sparked an existential question: is Spotify still a force for good in the music industry? Or has it become a corporate giant that sacrifices the interests of artists for profit? Meanwhile, Spotify is trying to reinvent itself by doubling down on podcasts, hoping that this will be the key to its long-term success. The company has invested heavily in exclusive podcast content, signing deals with high-profile figures like Joe Rogan and Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. However, this shift has only added to the controversy. Many users feel that Spotify is prioritizing podcasts at the expense of music, leaving artists feeling sidelined. The platform's gamble on podcasts has raised concerns about whether the company can balance the interests of both music and podcast creators while continuing to grow its subscriber base. As Spotify continues to evolve, its future remains uncertain. The company's relationship with artists is strained, and the growing podcast focus has yet to prove that it can bring the kind of revenue necessary to sustain Spotify's massive global operation. But one thing is clear: the streaming model, for all its benefits, is under intense scrutiny. Spotify's ability to navigate these challenges will determine whether it remains the dominant player in the streaming world or becomes another cautionary tale of a company that lost sight of its original mission. Spotify's story is still being written, and how it responds to these challenges may shape the future of music streaming for years to come. Can Spotify remain the champion of music lovers and a fair platform for artists? Or will it continue to push the limits of its business model at the expense of its core creators? The next chapter in Spotify's journey will be a critical one that could determine whether the platform survives or crumbles under the weight of its own success.